Welcome to SailPoint offices. Welcome to Austin. Thanks for making time while you're here visiting some of your team. I really appreciate you making a visit to our global headquarter, fantastic studio here. But let's just open up. First, just tell folks your name and what you're currently doing. How about that?
Well, hello, everyone. I'm Sumit Dhawan. I work at Proofpoint. I'm the CEO there.
And you and I are cousins. This is my cousin, ladies and gentlemen, meaning we're both part of the Thoma Bravo family of companies. And I guess we'll talk maybe a little more about that. But let's talk a little bit about how has it been in, I guess, a little over a year, about a year you've been running things at Proofpoint. Tell me how that journey's been for you.
You know, it's passed by quick. Let me just first start off that way. You're right. It's about 12 months now. It feels like 12 years. Although a lot accomplished, feel great about where we are going. We're here in Austin for our Protect conference. We just announced some amazing innovations. And overall, just the momentum that we are seeing with customers in adopting our solutions, us continuing to innovate and help them both in terms of defending for threats as well as in protecting their information with our technology has been great. So feel great about the business, the direction of the technology we're taking, as well as just the response from the customers.
Fantastic. Yeah, we'll maybe come back to a little more what's happening in the industry. I think you and I were chatting offline, pre-show here, on things like, hey, sometimes there's a misconception about kind of our role as leaders in a PE-backed company. And I think you and I share a view that our friends at Thoma Bravo, in our case, that's our backer, they give us quite a bit of leeway on strategy. And I feel like, I'm sure you feel the same way about what you're able to kind of do from a directional standpoint with the company.
Yeah, you know, the world of private equities have changed quite a bit. I think Thoma Bravo is a company, obviously it's a private equity company, but their approach in cybersecurity has been to not necessarily when they acquire multiple companies to force them to have them work together or mash them up together, which is maybe an old school private equity play, and in some cases still works. But in our case, we run our businesses, we are focused on our businesses. Yeah, we know each other, we are friends otherwise, and we are here because of more just personal relationships and knowing each other, not necessarily being asked to work together.
Right.
And I think that's healthy.
Yes.
And then secondly, we're growth companies in both cases. You know, SailPoint is doing extremely well, growing, and even just Thoma Bravo's philosophy has been to acquire companies that are leaders in the spaces and letting them invest behind them and let them grow, which was something I learned after I joined the company. This is my first time working with Thoma Bravo. And it's been a great experience so far.
Yeah, I think we're all shifted from the last few years ago of kind of growth at all costs. I don't know that you would have ever thought of yourself that way. We didn't, but we were certainly leaning in heavily on growth. And now, whatever term we want to use, efficient growth, various flavors of saying, look, the markets clearly say, I want you to grow, but I want you to grow in a disciplined manner, ideally throwing off bottom line profit and or cash flow. So I think we've all shifted to, okay, I want to build a good, healthy, long-term business, solve market problems, grow well, but do so in a way in which you can kind of show profitability over the long haul. And I think that's just a smart way to run a business.
It's probably just business 101.
Business 101. Look at us. We're older guys. We're just figuring out business 101. Well, let's shift back, Sumit, to kind of you and I are both living in the realm of security, and you guys particularly have done exceptionally well over the kind of the threat landscape. I know the heritage was originally kind of primarily emails and stuff, but let's just talk about some of the trends from your perspective on what's happening in the market, kind of from the threat actors. You know, look, it's already 3 minutes in. I'm just going to say AI for the first time. AI is happening. So, like, just some of what you observe you and your team are thinking about relative to the threat landscape and how we're helping our enterprise customers succeed.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we are seeing, and it's not new, it's sort of always been the case where you think about in today's world, the threats are not necessarily all coming into network ports and endpoints. They're being socially crafted on individuals that work for our companies because they're oftentimes the most strategic and the weakest link. Okay, and so as a result, these socially engineered attacks are more prevalent now. What we are seeing is the volume of attacks are higher and the sophistication of attacks have become higher and bigger. Why? Because there are generative technologies. You know, Grammarly can write a very sophisticated email in any language you want, and can issue an attack. And understanding social behavior from all forms of communication channel that our employees use, and the dependency we have on it in the digital way, interacting with our suppliers and partner network, creates all kinds of vulnerabilities. So we are seeing this threat landscape all of a sudden become much more socially engineered and much higher coming from business partners and digital relationships that have been created, and all at the human tier.
Yes.
And the second threat vector, which has become real, is what I would call risk of your own employees being not sort of as careful as they can be with the information. So the insider risk, which was
Right.
always thought of as these malicious users,
Yes.
it's actually become much bigger, where careless mistakes, because of how we all now work, our lives and our work lives and our personal lives have all sort of mixed together because of flexible work styles.
Yep.
And that's created a behavior which is risky to the organization because that behavior can leak information and sensitive information in an unintended way. So not a traditional way of a threat,
Think an insider threat, yeah.
but it's an insider threat that's there. So those are the two pretty big changes that are here to stay.
Absolutely. Yeah. I was laughing as you were talking. The days of spotting a malicious email because there was obvious misspellings in it. Probably not the
Not
way
the
we're
case.
going to catch the bad guys anymore.
Not
right?
the
I
case.
think the days of, oh, this is obviously fake or obviously evil because look how bad it is. Like now these things are incredibly well crafted, very targeted, as you said. You nailed that part of, I think sometimes we in our spaces are guilty of joining this theme that you hear sometimes. Oh, identity is the new perimeter. You don't need a perimeter defense. I'm like, oh no, you still need a new perimeter. You still need a perimeter defense, but it's clearly not sufficient, right? You can't just assume that the perimeter network blocking and all those things are going to solve it. So much of it's going to get through that defense. And it's going to get to these socially engineered attacks, like you said. So yeah, I think we both have different ways of helping that. Sometimes we call it layers of defense, right? I like to say, look at your house, right? You don't just put a deadbolt on the door. You probably have a camera, and you might buy a dog, and there's lots of layers of defense. It's the same thought in our organizations that we're trying to help protect, right? So yeah, if you think of that, you're probably more expert than me on this one. If you think of how Gen AI, that whole trend is changing the sophistication of the attack. What are some of the most interesting things you're seeing in that realm?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we are seeing is, firstly, languages, like you mentioned. Language is no longer a barrier. So for any of the listeners here who are in potentially countries or operate in businesses in languages which have not been approachable to the threat actors, though that's no longer the case. For example, if you see the trends and the volume of phishing attacks, how they have changed year over year, the languages where the phishing attacks have grown at the highest rate are in Far East, in Korea, in Middle East, Middle Eastern languages, and in certain Latin American countries. So why? Because language is no longer the barrier. That's number one. Secondly, suppliers and partners related attacks from compromise in order to do business compromise are real. Okay, so those have become very sophisticated, and a single account compromise in any of your supplier network have created a massive exposure to you and having a financial fraud that can happen, because now your security is all of a sudden dependent on how well the security of any of your suppliers or any of your business partner is. And it's nearly impossible for you to dictate the terms there, but yet you have to protect against potential fraud that's coming in. We are seeing account takeovers, which is an account at a potential business partner that gets compromised, and now you have some kind of a financial fraud that starts from there. Very easy. You think your account payable person is thinking they're communicating with a person.
Right.
And it's very hard for them to now all of a sudden see a slight change in the account number that all of a sudden the account is getting paid to. And in those cases, if you think about it, these are all such subtle changes that you almost need a completely different generative AI technology to protect against it.
Yes.
And that's how we have had to adapt. Now, humans are not using zeros and ones. They're using languages, and they have intent. So all of our technology now, it used to be very much pattern-based. Oh, we can detect the pattern, and the patterns can basically tell if this is a a communication that should be condemned or should be let go through,
Yeah.
right? Not anymore, because if I'm a threat actor, what I would do, if I know, Proofpoint is the technology that's defending this specific person who I am now going to try to do a financial fraud, I'll just keep changing the email using something like ChatGPT until
Something gets through.
Until something gets through. And then pattern-based technology,
doesn't work.
while it'll learn, but it'll be too late by the time it learns. So now we have adopted more language models. So the language models are now sort of fighting the language models.
It's the war of the robots here kind of thing, right?
So our language models are basically detecting the intent.
Yeah.
Because now you got to detect the intent, and then you have to really track, is this particular person usually communicating with the same level of urgency about a financial transaction? And if it's not been the case in the past, that means an intent is changed. So you have options to either guard the user, nudge the user to sort of be vigilant, or block it, right? Depending on what you want. So it's like it's the world of technology on both ends are changing,
right,
for threat defense.
Yeah, no, I think we like we get the question all the time, well, is AI a good thing for you or a bad thing for you? I'm like, yes, right? Like, one of those silly yes answers to an or question, but there really is a sense of it's going to enable a different level or sophistication of attack, and we have to rapidly, and we are, like you, spending a lot of energy thinking about how do we leverage these technologies to be more sophisticated in our understanding of where there are risks. And like you said, there's always the policy decision inside an organization of, do you want me to stop that, flag that, kind of flag it? In our world of identity provisioning and identity lifecycle, right? One of the funny jokes is always like, that looks like it might be a bad account, but it's maybe the CEO's account, so I'm not going to turn it off. You turn it off. At the help desk, there's like, I'm not touching that, you touch that. So I think that we always have this kind of, like you said, the sophistication of the technology is changing how we both receive attacks and threats and how we respond to them, but that we're still living in a realm of people trying to get their jobs done, trying to understand what I was asked to do. Is this something I was expecting or not? So much of this, like you say, is expectations. It's still, I think, that human line of defense is often, is this something you were expecting? Did it come in a way that's different? And like you said, now it's getting so hard to detect some of those subtle changes. We're going to need the technology to help us.
It has to be. And I think there is the other part that will be needed is because as this sophistication of so much adaptive and generative technologies that are defending us, I do think some of the stuff that you were mentioning they'll require a little more intelligence for the operators, right? And that's why I see companies that do great at what they do. Like, for example, what you do, you're the best in class from when it comes to identity. We are more upstream in protecting at the access tier or threat tier, best in class in what we do. But if we don't provide the two technologies to work together, then the onus ends up going to that operator who's now hesitant in how to apply intelligence on the upstream level to there. So I think the onus ends up being for us to not just innovate using these technologies, but also these technologies create a level of sophistication, which means for operational purposes, we have some more work to continue to integrate.
Absolutely. And I think we both feel this way, that often the impetus to do that often comes from our biggest, most sophisticated customers.
Right.
They'll grab a few of the key vendors in their
They'll tell
security landscape. You guys get together and help us solve this, because it's too hard to tie all these things together. And that is one of the biggest challenges. This might be an interesting that's, I don't know if it's a slight segue, but there's a lot of things happening in security. One of the frustrations, I certainly tell people, if you want to feel the frustration of what it's like to be a CISO, just go to the RSA conference once a year out there in San Francisco, and you'll walk in and you'll see 800 or 900 vendors that are all saying blah, 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 ginger, according to the old Far Side joke, right? Like some kind of words that sound very similar, booth to booth to booth. You're like, if I'm a CISO, how am I supposed to sort through all this? So I think the biggest customers are saying, I need some of you in the community, the ecosystem of security, to kind of knit these things together, make them come at me more integrated. Maybe there'll still be custom things we need to do in our shop to be specific, but please integrate more. What do you think is one of the most or poorest understood things in the landscape of our customers today? Like, as the world's rapidly changing, what do you think people today are sometimes missing? Not because they're dumb, but they just might not be aware of some of the things and how rapidly they're changing. What do you think the average CISO might be surprised that you think you see happening in your realm?
Yeah, I mean, I think talking a little bit about ecosystem, maybe was it a surprise or a gradual realization? Maybe is how I would describe it. You know, if you think about the CISO as a profession and the background, it was a very technical
Yes.
role,
Yes.
and has remained technical rightfully, which has been a healthy thing. And over the course of last 10 years, when the digital transformation was taking place, and it's still going on, but the cloud and mobile created the threat surface, which was so big.
So big.
And that's when the perimeter shifted from just being a network-based perimeter to being more a user-based perimeter, because users are the ones using digital. Identity became sort of very critical. But in the midst of all of it, what was happening was there were so many holes that were there. And the promise of a single solution provider to provide that, which Symantec ended up sort of promising the world that they will be this single solution provider.
Right.
It didn't hold true.
No.
It fell apart because they couldn't hold the onus of providing an integrated solution, which is a clear proof that that is not a sustainable strategy that can be executed easily
Right.
for now.
Right.
Okay, then the new era of solution providers have come in. You know, we're one of them, yourselves.
Yeah.
Obviously, there are other industry players in the network security space and the endpoint security space.
Right.
And to me, those are the four key solution platforms in cyber that have emerged. Identity, something to do with human centricity, which is threat and information protection, network, and endpoint. If you have those four controls set up, and they are integrated into your architecture, and you have an operational model with SIM and SOAR, which obviously are going through their own rejuvenation and modernization, then to me, that's your cybersecurity architecture. You can call it a customer's platform of platforms, or best of platforms that they have stitched together. Now, that is a realization that's coming in, because there is no way CISOs can keep going down the path of playing whack-a-mole, of defending every possible thing. Instead, you have to think about how you're going to operationalize and manage risk through a suite of key solutions that fit together. That's a shift. It makes sense. It's happened in every industry. It's going to happen, I think, in cyber as well.
Yeah, well, and you know, been around all of tech a long time, both of us, and I think there's always this tension. Customers sort of want integrated, single source solutions so it all works together, until they feel like that vendor has too much power and control, and they want competition again, so they don't get locked in, and the vendor doesn't innovate enough. So there's always this pendulum. We're into the best of breed suite argument here, right? A little bit like, oh, should it all come from one? Well, except that one might get complacent and not deliver enough value, and then you get innovation coming from the edges, so to speak, and all of a sudden you're into a new. And I think there's just always tension there. And as you said, there's so much specialization in our realms of security. It's very difficult to imagine one enterprise fully understanding all of that and solving all of those problems for our customers. I think, like you said, the onus is on us in the industry to say, I've got a depth of expertise. They have other depth. They have other depth. Together, we can help you provide true security for your enterprise. That onus is.
And I think in the world of cyber, because of obvious reasons on risks, it's very difficult to pick a compromised, B or a C grade.
Good enough doesn't work in our space.
Yeah, you basically may as well not have it, and then take the risk of not having it until something is ready from your preferred provider, if that's the path you're going to go. But I don't see that as anything that any of the CISOs are exploring. You know, it's a risk management game, and managing the risk is obviously making sure that you're placing fewer bets, but not a single bet.
Yes.
Which compromises the whole thing in a bad way.
That guard house analogy, my picture in my somewhat warped mind was, so if that guard dog, you don't need a little toy poodle. That's not really going to help you defend your home. So they have to have a strong enough layer, all these layers of defense, you have to have a strong enough layer. That's great. Well, look, let's, one more topic. I always love to talk with leaders on the phone, whether they're CEOs or just broadly leading. Tell me about some of your leadership philosophy. How do you think about leading your organization through what's been pretty challenging times for all of us in the last few years, right? Not the greatest of backdrop circumstances, economically, a little bit of noise, and there's some election thing looming, I've heard. So, I mean, there's just stuff going on out there. Just how do you think about leading through kind of uncertain times or changing dynamic times?
Yeah. Well, first of all, leadership is fun, but at the same time exhausting, as we all know.
Yeah, we're actually both 27. This is what it does to you, this gray hair thing. It's very challenging. challenging.
But you know what? My philosophy on leadership is that as a leader, if I can provide the narrative on direction where we are headed and create an environment where everyone feels like they can do their best possible work, I feel like a lot of magic starts happening.
Yeah.
Obviously, you rely on hiring great people, but if you have great people and they feel like they want to do the best work of their lives and they can be themselves while they do so, as leaders, I feel like we have provided what's possible. And, obviously the team looks up for direction, narrative, and I use the word narrative too broadly when I say the word narrative, but it's direction of. And so once you've got the direction and the narrative, then I feel like the best thing I can do is to have an environment where people want to do the best work of their lives, because, and we're striving to do that at Proofpoint. Proofpoint, we have our cultural values. We are in the process of sort of simplifying them, and we've sort of repeatedly said that we want to have a company that has performance-based culture. Now, performance-based culture can mean a lot of things. It doesn't mean that we're going to hire and fire because it's just harsh performance measurements. And no, it just means that I want to have people that think that the best work of their lives is in front of them, and Proofpoint is the place where they want to do so. Secondly, they can do it with people they enjoy working with, because it's no longer a single person's job, it's collaborative in our scale companies. And then third, they can be themselves, because it's just worse if anyone is not being themselves, there's no way they're having fun and can continue, right? And those three are the attributes I'd love to see come into the Proofpoint more and more. Not that we don't have it, but just we keep fostering that culture.
There. Boy, we have a lot of common philosophies. A couple metaphors I've come to use over the years. I talk about guardrails, that when you're managing professionals, I feel like the guardrails are, on the one hand, like you said, you have to define reality. Here's where we are, here's what's happening, and here's where we need to go directionally, goals, objectives. And then the other guardrail is they have to have enough freedom to be able to bring their best self, their experience, their knowledge to work. Because if they don't understand where they're going, that's frustrating for a competent professional. And if they're dictated, micromanaged, and told what to do and how to do it, that's frustrating for professionals. So if you can say, I'm going to give you enough clarity where we want to go and enough freedom of how to go accomplish it, like you said, that's when people...
I like that.
And then
like
great teammates. You nailed the other piece, right?
Yeah.
And you want to come to work with, as we like to say at SailPoint, no smart jerks.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I don't need the super smart person who's not pleasant to be around or thinks they need to be the smartest person in the room. We need these highly competent people who appreciate each other, right? And what they're doing, have clarity where we need them to go, and then freedom to go figure out how to best get there. So we have a very similar philosophy of leadership. That is fantastic. Well, I guess last thoughts. What are you thinking about directionally for you and the company as you look over into 2025 is the next year, all right? I think, that's correct.
Yeah, coming up. Listen, I'm excited about the future. If you think about it, two things. One, the world at this point in time and just the technology spend, the customers have hard choices. There is a lot of energy that's going towards being ready for AI. Every customer I speak with, they're allocating in whatever budget they've always had. They've said a disproportionate amount has been allocated to invest, explore, and leverage AI. So that means they have less left to do
the
more
other stuff.
right? And so to me, cybersecurity at the same time is one that will continue to get more focus, but we will be asked to provide and do more with less, right? And so that is more promising, in my opinion, for companies like yours and mine, because it means that if customers already have a relationship, if they already have expertise in leveraging a technology platform, and if we can have them extend it to do more, it's effectively delivering on the promise of doing more with less, because they don't need to deal with so many different tech platforms, a bunch of little things. And if we can provide richer solutions that are integrated, this sort of best of platforms that we were talking about in cyber, it helps our customers achieve their goals, And then the last thing for me that gets our entire team motivated, this is something I have learned after joining the company. It's if I sort of think about all the people at Proofpoint, most of them, they wake up and get excited about doing one thing, which is to protect our customers. And we sort of say that, our mission is to have, if job of a CISO or job of a security professional, think about it. It's probably the worst possible job, worse than ours. But I think they're dealing with this.
I thought we liked our jobs. I'm confused. I'm sorry.
They like
hey, you Thoma Bravo guys, we love our jobs. That's what we meant to say.
They like theirs as well. But I mean, at the end of the day, think about as the security professional or CISO, there's so much uncertainty.
Yes.
It's kind of like they're dealing with anything that can happen outside of their control.
Yes.
And that can lead to a miserable day or month for them, right? And if in the midst of all of that, we can provide a moment of zen for them, I think we have accomplished our mission. And that sort of is the mission statement we have put forward to the employees. Let's just provide a moment of zen to everyone we serve. That's security professionals, CISOs, the individuals that are using our technology, all the way at the end users. Because to some extent, a bad day for them is when they click on something bad and they cause a business implication. So that's what I'm excited about. Listen, all the rough things we face in the cyber, all the economic challenges, elections. There's a lot of positivity we bring to the world by our solutions, and we think we're only going to make it better going forward.
Well said. All right, last question, semi-personal. I always like to ask seasoned leaders. Use that term a little bit.
I said seasoning.
Yeah, seasoning. You and I are salt and pepper. I've got a little more salt. You're still in the pepper stage. What would you tell your younger self? Kind of what do you wish you knew 25 years ago that you've learned? I mean, we all learn through the school of hard knocks at some degree, and that's sometimes the only good way to learn certain lessons, I think. But if there are things you go, wow, I wish I had known this, and it would have maybe either made part of the journey easier or more straightforward. Anything come to mind in that realm?
I mean, I think my younger self. I was just thinking about. I have a almost 21-year-old son, and I think one of the things I would say is that just continuing to believe in the purpose usually leads to the right things. Not losing belief and having confidence in the belief, regardless of the good and the bad days, is the best lesson I've learned over time, and that's what I tell my son or our teams. Listen, the most important thing that you need to have is the belief in the purpose that we are going after. If you don't, then go find something else.
Yeah. My two caveats are always alongside, and I'm fundamentally in agreement 100% on purpose. I always tell people the two things, though. Don't quite buy the you can be anything you want to be. I had no chance to be a professional basketball player. That would have been fun, but I'm not that tall, and I don't jump that high and all that. And then I think the other is that I just said, my kids are a little older than yours. I said, purpose is great as long as it pays the bills. Right? Like you need a purpose and you need to be self-supporting. As long as those things go together, you can add that to your 21-year-old. Mine are in their late 20s and 30s. They've got that message very well. They're doing fantastic. All of you out there, you're doing great. But yeah, there's that I love. Go chase your purpose. Please make sure it's something, and like you said,
you can live.
You got to live on it. You got to live on it, and ideally, like you say, you can change or modify as you learn about life. You might decide you thought something was a direction, and I always joke. I'm sure you're the same boat. I say, as a 7-year-old, I was not dreaming of building an identity management company someday. Not true. At 7, I didn't know what that was, so I thought I was going to be a pro baseball player. Of course I did. So, there's a sense of you kind of discover more of your purpose sometimes as you go, and you and I are in this privileged position of leading very interesting companies in a great space, right? So not sure this is where I thought I'd be 30 or 40 years ago, but I'm having a lot of fun with it. So there is that. Well, any final thoughts? It's been a great chat.
It's been great. Thanks for having me. Thanks for all the audience, and look forward to continuing the partnership we've had, Mark.
Agreed. But more that we can do together to help our customers is a win-win-win, as
100%.
they say. All right. And one more thing, Sumit, I'd love to ask some of the guests is, either what have you recently been reading or something you've read that's had an impact on you, just anything like that you'd like to talk about, something that's affecting your thinking?
Yeah, it's a new one, so I haven't read it all. I've just started reading it. It's called The Book of Joy.
Oh.
And it's, this thing about, I just had a milestone birthday. So
35,
maybe,
huh?
Yeah.
Good for you.
So I said, I've always sort of said, listen, if there's one thing that we're all seeking, it's happiness. And I was like, okay, I'll just read a little bit about it. So it's a fun book. And I think the more I think about just what's happening with even our customers and just this whole thing about, stress, burnout, and, mental health, that's sort of is a topic. It surprisingly comes up so often in my conversations with CISOs.
Yeah.
And sort of this book kind of puts it all together in a good way. But it's a bit early. I've only kind of read first couple of chapters.
Well, I did write a book that has joy in the title, so I'm a fan of the concept. So I'm a fan. I try to vacillate a little bit between like fiction, which for me is usually historical fiction. I read all of Missioner's Texas last summer, which is like 1,000 pages. Actually, I listened to it. This actually amazes people. I'm a big Audible fan for fiction. That's like 60 hours. And people go, 60 hours? I'm like, you know what? If you listen at the gym and on your drives, that's like a month or a month and a half.
You probably
it's
have
shocking.
60 hours on the airports in a month.
You add airport time, drive time. It's pretty fun.
That sounds good.
I'm in the middle of Hawaii now. One of his other famous ones was Hawaii. My wife grew up in Hawaii, so I'm like, I'd like to understand. And it's historical fiction, right? The characters are made up.
I see.
But it's historical, so you're getting a sense of the history of the place. That's really fun. But yeah, I like to vacillate between historical fiction and then biography. And one of my good friends once recommended this. I always tell people this story. He says, I try to only read biographies of people that have been dead at least 50 years. He said, because if you read a biography of someone who's still living or recently dead, there's a lot of spin still going on.
Yeah.
After a few decades, there's more of a clear-eyed view of, was this person really good, and did they do good things, or did they do not so good things?
I don't know. I do want to read if Steph Curry writes a book.
There you go. And those are fun to read. It just, you're a good point. Yeah, I would read Steph's book. He's quite an amazing man. Well, Sumit, thanks so much for joining us today. Really great conversation. Look forward to continuing our partnership as companies and just staying cousins in the happy family of Thoma Bravo. We'll check back in soon for more Identity Matters episodes where we'll talk with other impressive business and security leaders and simply those who are humble, hungry, and smart. Thanks for joining us.